In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where ancient species ruled with wisdom accumulated over millennia and humans were considered nothing more than upstart scavengers, one moment would change everything. It wasn't a grand battle or a diplomatic triumph that shifted the balance of power. It was a grease-stained mechanic with calloused hands standing in a dirty alley, making a split-second decision that would echo across star systems and reshape the very foundations of interstellar politics. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage create the largest ripples. Sometimes protecting the innocent becomes an act of revolution. And sometimes, when you save a dragon's child, you discover that gratitude among the ancient ones burns hotter than any star. This is the story of Marcus Chen, a human mechanic who thought he was just doing the right thing, and the Dragon Empress who proved that some debts can only be paid in blood, honor, and the complete restructuring of galactic civilization. Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his oil-stained hand, leaving another dark smudge across his already dirty face. The repair bay of Station Omega 7 was sweltering despite the environmental controls, and the ancient atmospheric recycler he'd been trying to fix for the past 6 hours seemed determined to make his life miserable. The Zilithian merchant who owned the station had been breathing down his neck all morning, complaining about the cost and questioning whether a mere human could handle such sophisticated technology. Mere human, Marcus muttered under his breath, reaching for another tool from his well-worn kit. It was always the same story. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years, and in that time they'd established themselves as competent mechanics, decent traders, and adequate soldiers. But they were never seen as equals to the ancient races like the Zilithians, who had mastered space travel when humans were still discovering fire, or the Arcturians, whose psychic abilities made them natural diplomats and scientists. The sound of his plasma torch echoed through the empty bay as Marcus worked on the recycler's main coupling. Most of the station's other mechanics had gone home hours ago, but Marcus needed the overtime pay. His younger sister Maya was starting her second year at the Terran Engineering Academy, and the tuition fees were brutal. Every credit counted. A sharp crash from outside the bay made Marcus pause. He listened carefully, his hand instinctively moving to the plasma torch's safety switch. Station Omega 7 wasn't exactly in the safest part of space. Located at the intersection of 3 major trade routes, it attracted merchants, pirates, smugglers, and worse. The station's security was notoriously corrupt, and violence was common in the lower levels. Another crash, followed by what sounded like breaking glass. Marcus set down his tools and moved toward the bay's entrance. His supervisor had always told him to mind his own business and avoid trouble, but something about the sounds didn't sit right with him. There was a desperate quality to the noise, like someone or something was running for their life. He poked his head out into the dimly lit corridor that connected the various repair bays and storage areas. The overhead lights flickered intermittently, casting dancing shadows on the metal walls. To his left, the corridor led to the main station concourse, where most of the legitimate businesses operated. To his right, it branched off into a maze of service tunnels and abandoned sections that had been closed off years ago due to budget cuts. The sound came again, definitely from the right. Marcus grabbed a portable light from his toolkit and stepped into the corridor. His work boots made soft squeaking sounds on the metal grating as he moved toward the source of the disturbance. Every instinct told him to turn around and go back to work, but he'd never been good at ignoring his conscience. As he rounded a corner, Marcus could hear voices now, rough, aggressive voices, speaking in what he recognized as Krillian. He'd worked on enough Krillian ships to pick up some of their language, and what he was hearing made his blood run cold. They were talking about hunting something down, about earning a big payday, and about making sure there were no witnesses. Marcus flattened himself against the wall and carefully peered around the next corner. What he saw made his heart race. 3 Krillians, their reptilian faces twisted with cruel anticipation, were backing something into a dead-end alcove. The Krillians were big, easily 7 feet tall, with thick scales that could deflect small arms fire and claws that could rip through standard hull plating. But it wasn't the Krillians that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It was what they were hunting. Huddled in the corner of the alcove was a creature Marcus had only seen in historical documentaries and ancient diplomatic footage. It was small, no bigger than a house cat, with iridescent scales that shifted from deep blue to silver in the flickering light. Its wings were folded tightly against its body, and its large, intelligent eyes were wide with terror. A dragon hatchling. Marcus felt his world shift. Dragons were among the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. They lived for thousands of years, possessed technology that bordered on magic, and commanded respect from every other intelligent race. They were also incredibly rare. Adult dragons typically produced only 1 or 2 offspring per century, and those hatchlings were treasured beyond measure. The sight of this terrified baby dragon being cornered by Krillian thugs filled Marcus with a rage he hadn't known he was capable of feeling. Dragon hatchlings were considered sacred by most galactic cultures. Harming one was not just a crime. It was an act of cosmic significance that would bring down the wrath of the entire dragon hierarchy. The lead Krillian was speaking into a communication device, probably reporting to his boss about their prize. Marcus caught enough of the words to understand that they planned to sell the hatchling to someone who collected rare creatures. The thought made him sick. The hatchling made a small, pathetic sound, part whimper, part chirp, and tried to back further into the corner. One of the Krillians laughed and reached out with a massive clawed hand. The baby dragon's scales flashed bright gold in a display of fear and defensive aggression, but it was far too young to pose any real threat. Marcus didn't think. He couldn't think. All he could do was act. He stepped around the corner, plasma torch in hand, and cleared his throat loudly. "Excuse me, gentlemen." The 3 Krillians spun around, surprise evident on their reptilian faces. The leader, a scarred brute with cybernetic implants along his jaw, bared his teeth in what passed for a Krillian grin. "Well, well," the leader hissed, in accented standard galactic. "A little human mechanic. You're lost, meat thing. Go back to your grease and oil before you get hurt." Marcus raised his plasma torch, activating it with a sharp blue flame that cast harsh shadows on the walls. "I don't think so. You're going to step away from the hatchling and walk out of here. Now." The Krillians looked at each other and burst into harsh, barking laughter. "A human thinks he can threaten us?" The second one growled. "Do you know what we are, little monkey? We are Krillian warriors. We have killed entire crews of human pirates. And do you know what that is?" Marcus nodded toward the cowering hatchling. "That's a dragon, a baby dragon. And if you heard it, every dragon in the galaxy will hunt you to the ends of space." The leader's grin widened. "That's exactly why it's so valuable. The buyer is offering enough credits to buy our own ship. As for the dragons finding us," he shrugged, "space is big. We'll be long gone by the time they figure out what happened." Marcus felt his grip tighten on the plasma torch. "You're making a mistake. The only one making a mistake is you, human." The leader drew a wicked-looking energy blade from his belt. "You should have minded your own business." The other 2 Krillians flanked their leader, drawing their own weapons. Marcus was outnumbered, outgunned, and facing 3 creatures who each outweighed him by 100 pounds. Any rational person would have backed down, apologized, and walked away. But Marcus looked at the terrified hatchling, its small body trembling as it pressed against the wall, and rationality went out the window. "Maybe," he said, adjusting his stance and pointing the plasma torch toward the nearest Krillian. "But I can't live with myself if I walk away from this." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Stupid human. You die now." The attack came fast. The leader lunged forward with his energy blade while the other 2 moved to flank Marcus from either side. Marcus rolled to the left, narrowly avoiding the crackling energy weapon, and swept his plasma torch in a wide arc. The superheated flame caught the second Krillian across the arm, and the creature roared in pain and anger. Marcus knew he couldn't win a straight fight. His only advantage was mobility, and the fact that the corridor was narrow enough to limit their ability to surround him completely. He feinted toward the leader, then spun and jabbed the plasma torch at the third Krillian center mass. The alien jumped back, but not quickly enough to avoid the flame entirely. The smell of burned scales filled the air. The injured Krillian on his left was recovering, raising what looked like a military-grade pulse rifle. Marcus dove behind a maintenance panel just as energy bolts began chewing up the wall where he'd been standing. Sparks flew as the bolts struck metal and wiring, and the lights flickered even more dramatically. Marcus popped up from behind cover and managed to catch the rifle-armed Krillian across the face with his torch. The alien stumbled backward, clawing at his burned features and howling in rage. But the leader was already moving, his energy blade humming as it cut through the air where Marcus's head had been a split second earlier. The fight was brutal and desperate. Marcus used every dirty trick he'd learned during his brief stint as a station security guard, plus a few he'd picked up from less reputable sources. He fought with the desperation of a man who knew he was probably going to die but refused to give up. The Krillians fought with the confidence of predators who had cornered their prey. Marcus managed to disable the pulse rifle by melting its barrel with his torch, but the effort left him exposed to the leader's blade. The energy weapon sliced across his left shoulder, sending white-hot pain shooting down his arm. He stumbled, his torch wavering in his grip. That was when he heard it, a sound like nothing he'd ever experienced before. It started low, almost below the threshold of hearing, but quickly rose to a penetrating crystalline note that seemed to resonate in his bones. Baby Dragon was singing. The Krillians froze, their weapons forgotten as they turned to stare at the hatchling. The small creature's scales were now glowing with an intense golden light, and its eyes had taken on an otherworldly luminescence. The song it was producing was hauntingly beautiful, filled with harmonics that spoke of vast spaces and ancient wisdom. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face without knowing why. The song reached something deep inside him, something that recognized the presence of something truly sacred and magnificent. But the effect on the Krillians was even more pronounced. They stood motionless, their weapons drooping in their hands, their faces slack with something that might have been awe or terror. The hatchling song rose to a crescendo, then cut off abruptly. In the sudden silence, Marcus could hear his own labored breathing and the distant hum of the station's machinery. The Krillians shook their heads as if waking from a dream, but something had changed in their expressions. The cruel confidence was gone, replaced by uncertainty and what looked suspiciously like fear. "What?" the leader stammered, his voice hoarse. "What was that?" Before Marcus could answer, a new voice echoed through the corridor. It was deep and melodious, with the same crystalline quality as the hatchling song, but infinitely more powerful. It spoke in perfect standard Galactic, but with an accent that suggested vast age and otherworldly authority. "That," the voice said, "was my daughter calling for help." Everyone turned toward the source of the voice. At the far end of the corridor, a figure was approaching through the shifting shadows. As it moved into the flickering light, Marcus felt his knees nearly give out. It was a dragon, not a hatchling, but a fully mature adult. She stood nearly 8 feet tall in her humanoid form, with scales that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Deep space black shot through with points of silver starlight. Her eyes were ancient amber, holding depths of knowledge and power that made Marcus feel like a child looking up at a vast mountain. Despite her humanoid shape, there was no mistaking what she was. Power radiated from her like heat from a forge. The Krillians dropped their weapons immediately. One of them actually fell to his knees. "Great one," the leader managed, his voice shaking. We didn't know." "You didn't know what?" The dragon's voice was perfectly controlled, but Marcus could hear something dangerous underneath it, like the rumble of a distant avalanche. "You didn't know that attacking a dragon hatchling is an act of war against my entire species? You didn't know that my daughter's distress call has already been heard by every dragon within 1,000 light years?" The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop several degrees. The dragon took another step forward, and Marcus caught a glimpse of her true form, flickering around the edges of her humanoid appearance, massive wings, claws that could rip through starship hulls, and eyes like burning stars. "Please," the leader whispered, "we were just following orders. Someone paid us to—" "I know exactly who paid you." The dragon's voice cut through his excuses like a blade. "The Hegemony Council's collector who thinks that hoarding the children of other species makes him powerful. Did you really think we wouldn't track the source of such an order?" She gestured, and the air around the Krillians began to shimmer. Marcus watched in fascination and terror as some kind of force field enveloped the three aliens, lifting them slightly off the ground. They struggled briefly, then went limp, apparently unconscious. "They will be delivered to the appropriate authorities," the dragon said, almost as an afterthought. Then she turned her attention to Marcus, and he felt the full weight of her ancient gaze settling on him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Marcus was acutely aware of his torn, grease-stained coveralls, his burned shoulder, and the fact that he was still holding a plasma torch like it might protect him from one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "You are injured," she said finally, her voice softer now, but still carrying that underlying power. "It's nothing," Marcus managed, though his shoulder was throbbing painfully. Is your daughter okay?" The dragon's expression shifted subtly, and for a moment Marcus thought he saw something like surprise in those ancient eyes. She looked past him to where the hatchling was slowly emerging from the corner, her small form still glowing faintly. "Lyrian," the dragon said, and the hatchling chirped happily and scampered over to her, climbing up her leg with the agility of a cat. "Are you hurt, little star?" The hatchling. Lyrian nestled against her mother's neck and made soft singing sounds. The dragon listened intently, then nodded. "She says you defended her," the dragon said, looking back at Marcus. "She says you were willing to die to protect her, even though you had never seen her before." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Anyone would have done the same thing." "No," the dragon said with absolute certainty. "They would not. I have lived for over 3,000 years, human Marcus Chen. I have seen empires rise and fall, watched species evolve and go extinct, witnessed acts of both incredible nobility and unspeakable evil. Very few beings would risk their lives for a stranger, especially when that stranger belongs to a species as powerful as mine." Marcus blinked. "How do you know my name?" The dragon smiled, revealing teeth that gleamed like polished obsidian. "I know many things. I know that you are 26 years old, that you work as a mechanic to pay for your sister's education, that you have never been in serious trouble with station security, and that you have a reputation for honesty among your human colleagues." Her expression grew more serious. "I also know that you chose to act despite knowing you would almost certainly die. That kind of courage is remarkable." "I just did what seemed right," Marcus said weakly. "Precisely." The dragon adjusted her grip on Lyrian, who was now purring like a tiny engine. "You acted from pure moral conviction, with no expectation of reward or recognition. Such behavior is extraordinarily rare in this galaxy." She stepped closer, and Marcus caught a scent like ozone and starlight. "My name is Seraphina Mordith, Empress of the Seventh Dragon Hierarchy and Guardian of the Crystal Nebula. By the ancient laws of my people, I am now bound to you by a debt of honor that can only be repaid in kind." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. You don't owe me anything." "Really?" Seraphina's amber eyes seemed to look right through him. "Human Marcus Chen, in exactly 3 minutes, every major power in this sector of the galaxy will receive a message from me declaring that you are under the personal protection of the Dragon Hierarchy. Any harm done to you will be considered an act of war against my people." "What? Why?" Marcus's voice came out as a squeak. "Because," Seraphina said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "you saved my daughter's life. And because the galaxy is about to learn what it means when dragons consider themselves in debt to a human." She turned and began walking away, her unconscious prisoners floating along behind her in their energy field. At the entrance to the corridor, she paused and looked back. "Oh, and Marcus? You might want to inform your supervisor that you'll be taking some time off. We have much to discuss." Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone in the flickering corridor with a burned shoulder, 100 questions, and the growing realization that his quiet life as a station mechanic had just ended forever. Marcus stood in the empty corridor for what felt like an eternity after Serafina disappeared. His hands were shaking, and not just from the adrenaline. The plasma torch felt impossibly heavy in his grip, and his burned shoulder was sending sharp waves of pain down his arm every time he moved. He tried to process what had just happened. 3 minutes ago, he'd been a nobody mechanic fixing an atmospheric recycler. Now he was apparently under the protection of a dragon empress, which sounded impressive and terrifying in equal measure. He had no idea what that meant for his future, but he suspected it wasn't going to involve much grease and oil. The sound of approaching footsteps snapped him out of his daze. Marcus quickly shut off his plasma torch and tried to look casual, which was difficult considering his torn coveralls and the scorch marks on the walls. A pair of station security guards rounded the corner, their faces skeptical and alert. "Chen?" The lead guard, a grizzled Terran named Rodriguez who'd worked station security for 15 years, looked around at the damaged corridor with raised eyebrows. What the hell happened here? Marcus opened his mouth to explain, then realized he had no idea how to begin. How do you tell someone that you just fought off 3 Krillian kidnappers to save a dragon hatchling, then had a conversation with a 3,000-year-old dragon empress who claimed she was now in your debt? "There was a fight," he said finally, "with Trust Teddy. Some Krillians were causing trouble." Rodriguez's partner, a young human woman named Patel, was scanning the area with her tricorder. Energy weapons discharge. Plasma torch burns, signs of a significant struggle. She looked up at Marcus. "Where are the Krillians now?" "Gone," Marcus said, which was technically true. Rodriguez stepped closer, his expression concerned. "Chen, you're hurt. What really happened here? Did someone try to shake you down for protection money? We've been having problems with Krillian gangs lately." Before Marcus could answer, every communication device in the corridor began chiming simultaneously. Rodriguez and Patel both checked their wrist units, and Marcus watched their expressions change from curiosity to shock to something approaching panic. "What is it?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. Rodriguez was reading from his display, his voice tight with disbelief. "Priority alert from Galactic Communications Authority. With official diplomatic message being broadcast on all channels from..." He paused and blinked several times. "From the Dragon Hierarchy?" Patel's tricorder was beeping insistently. "I'm picking up massive energy signatures throughout the station. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace just outside our defense perimeter." "Don't turn in to greet." Her voice rose. "Sir, these aren't standard vessel signatures. These readings are off the charts." Marcus felt his stomach sink. Serafina had said 3 minutes. Apparently, she'd been serious. Rodriguez's communicator crackled to life. "All security personnel report to Central Command immediately. This is not a drill. We have multiple unknown vessels approaching the station, and..." The voice paused, confusion evident. "And apparently the Dragon Hierarchy wants to talk to someone named Marcus Chen?" Both guards turned to stare at Marcus, who suddenly felt like he might throw up. "You're Marcus Chen," Rodriguez said slowly. "Yeah," Marcus admitted. "And the Dragon Hierarchy wants to talk to you, apparently." Patel's tricorder beeped again. "Sir, I'm reading 12 actually. I can't get an accurate count. There are a lot of ships out there, and they're using some kind of cloaking technology I've never seen before." Rodriguez grabbed Marcus by his good arm. "Okay, Chen, we're going to Central Command right now, and you're going to explain exactly what's going on. Because if this station gets turned into space dust because of some business involving you, I want to know about it first." As they hurried through the corridors toward the central command center, Marcus caught glimpses of the chaos that was already spreading throughout the station. Every public display screen was showing the same message in dozens of languages, but the standard galactic version was clear enough. By decree of Empress Seraphina Mordeth of the 7th Dragon Hierarchy, the human Marcus Chen is hereby placed under formal dragon protection. Any harm, threat, or coercion directed toward this individual will be considered an act of war against the dragon species and responded to accordingly. The message was signed with a symbol that Marcus recognized from historical documents: the official seal of the dragon hierarchy, a stylized dragon wrapped around a burning star. People throughout the station had stopped what they were doing to stare at the displays. Marcus heard fragments of conversation as they passed. Never seen anything like it. Thought dragons were just a myth. Protection detail usually reserved for their own species. When they reached Central Command, the scene was barely controlled chaos. The station's command crew was rushing between terminals, trying to manage what appeared to be the most significant diplomatic event in the station's history. The main view screen showed a tactical display of local space, and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. There were ships out there. Lots of ships. They hung in space around Station Omega, 7 like a constellation of predators, their sleek forms barely visible against the starfield. Marcus couldn't get an accurate count because they seemed to flicker in and out of visibility, but there had to be at least 20 vessels, each one easily the size of a Terran heavy cruiser. Chen! Station Commander Vasquez, a stern woman in her 50s who'd been running Omega 7 for 8 years, spotted them as they entered. "Get over here now. I need answers." Rodriguez practically dragged Marcus over to the command station where Vasquez was coordinating with her staff. Her expression was somewhere between furious and terrified. "Explain," she said without preamble. "Why do I have a Dragon Hierarchy battle fleet sitting outside my station demanding to speak with one of my mechanics?" Marcus looked around at the assembled staff, all of whom were staring at him like he'd just sprouted wings. "It's complicated. Uncomplicated," Vasquez snapped. "Fast!" Marcus took a deep breath and gave them the abbreviated version. The attack on the Hatchling, his intervention, the arrival of the Dragon Empress, and her declaration of protection. He left out some of the more personal details, but hit the main points. When he finished, the command center was silent except for the background hum of electronics and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. "You fought 3 armed Krillians," Vasquez said slowly, "to save a baby dragon." "Yes, ma'am." "With a plasma torch?" "Yes, ma'am." "And now the Dragon Hierarchy considers you family." Marcus winced. "Something like that." The communications officer, a young Arcturian whose psychic abilities made him excellent at interspecies communication, looked up from his station with wide eyes. "Commander, I'm receiving a priority transmission from the flagship. They're requesting permission to send an envoy to speak with Mr. Chen." Vasquez rubbed her temples. In her 8 years as station commander, she dealt with pirate attacks, smuggling rings, diplomatic incidents, and even a minor rebellion. But she'd never had to handle a Dragon Hierarchy fleet showing up to protect one of her mechanics. "Do we have a choice?" she asked. The Arcturian's expression became even more concerned. "Ma'am," their exact words were, "requesting permission as a matter of courtesy. I get the impression that if we refuse, they'll send the envoy anyway." "Wonderful." Vasquez turned back to Marcus. "Chen, I don't know what you've gotten yourself into, but as of right now you're the most important person on this station. Whatever the dragons want from you, try not to start an interstellar war." Marcus nodded weakly. "I'll do my best." The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. The Dragon fleet transmitted detailed docking instructions for their envoy ship, which required reconfiguring one of the station's primary docking bays to accommodate what was apparently a significantly different type of technology. The medical team insisted on treating Marcus's shoulder, which gave him a few minutes to collect his thoughts while a medic applied a healing gel and tissue regenerator to the plasma burn. When the envoy ship docked, Marcus was waiting in the diplomatic reception area along with Commander Vasquez and a small honor guard. He'd been given a clean station uniform to replace his torn coveralls, which made him feel slightly more presentable, but didn't do anything for his nerves. The airlock cycled, and Marcus got his first look at a formal Dragon Hierarchy delegation. There were 3 of them. The first was clearly a military officer, wearing what looked like ceremonial armor that seemed to be crafted from the same star-filled scales as Seraphina's skin. The second was dressed in elaborate robes and carried what might have been ceremonial implements. But it was the third member of the delegation that made Marcus's heart race. It was Seraphina herself, though she looked different from the figure he'd met in the corridor. She was wearing formal diplomatic attire that somehow managed to be both elegant and intimidating. Her scales had taken on a more formal pattern, deep midnight blue shot through with silver tracery that formed complex geometric designs. She looked every inch the Dragon Empress. "Commander Vasquez," Seraphina said, her voice carrying easily across the reception area. "I thank you for allowing this meeting. I am Seraphina Mordeth." Vasquez stepped forward, doing her best to follow standard diplomatic protocols, despite the unprecedented situation. "Your Majesty, Station Omega 7 is honored by your presence. Please, how can we assist you?" "I have come to speak with Marcus Chen," Seraphina said, "and to ensure that he understands the implications of what has transpired." She turned to Marcus, and once again he felt the weight of her ancient gaze. But this time, there was something different in her expression. Something that might have been approval. "Marcus," she said, "we need to discuss your future." The military officer stepped forward. "With your permission, Majesty, perhaps we should adjourn to a more secure location?" Vasquez nodded quickly. "Of course, we've prepared Conference Room Alpha. It's shielded and secure." As they moved toward the conference room, Marcus caught sight of the tactical display again. The Dragon Fleet was still there, hanging in space like a protective barrier around the station. He wondered if they would stay long and what their presence meant for everyone else on Omega B7. The conference room was one of the station's nicer spaces, with a polished table and comfortable chairs designed to accommodate multiple species. Seraphina took a seat across from Marcus while her companions positioned themselves near the door. Commander Vasquez and her security chief remained standing near the back of the room. "Marcus," Seraphina began, her voice formal but not unkind, "what I told you in the corridor was true. By saving Lyrian's life, you have created a debt of honor that my people take very seriously. However, I suspect you do not fully understand what that means." Marcus shifted in his chair. "I'm getting the impression it's bigger than I thought." Seraphina smiled, and for a moment she looked less like an ancient empress and more like someone's elegant aunt. "Dragons live for millennia, Marcus. In our culture, debts of honor are considered sacred obligations that can span centuries or even longer. When I say that my people are indebted to you, I mean that quite literally." The robed figure spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the same crystalline quality but with an academic precision. "What Her Majesty is explaining is that you are now considered what we call honor bonded to the Dragon Hierarchy. This is an extremely rare designation that has only been granted to 43 individuals in the past 2,000 years. "What does that mean exactly?" Marcus asked. "It means," Seraphina said, "that you are under our protection for as long as you live. It means that any enemy of yours becomes an enemy of ours. It means that you have the right to call upon Dragon assistance for any reasonable request, and that request will be honored as if it came from one of our own." Marcus felt his head spinning. "I don't want anything like that. I just wanted to help a kid, a hatchling, who was in trouble." "I know," Seraphina said gently, "which is precisely why you deserve such recognition. Marcus, what you did tonight was not just brave. It was the kind of pure, selfless action that defines the very best of what any species can be." The military officer stepped forward. "Sir, if I may explain the practical implications?" At Seraphina's nod, he continued. "As an honor-bonded individual, You now have access to Dragon diplomatic channels, which means you can travel freely throughout Dragon space and many neutral systems. You have the right to request escort or protection services. Most importantly, any organization that wishes to harm you must now consider the consequences of facing Dragon retaliation. Marcus looked around the room, taking in the serious expressions on everyone's faces. This is all because I helped one small dragon? One small dragon who happens to be my daughter? Seraphina said. One small dragon who is also the heir to the Crystal Nebula domains and will someday command fleets of her own. Her expression grew more serious. But more than that, Marcus, what you did represents something that my people value above almost everything else. The willingness to sacrifice for others without expecting any reward. Commander Vasquez cleared her throat. Your Majesty, if I may ask, what does this mean for my station and for Mr. Chen's continued employment here? Seraphina turned to her with something like amusement. Commander, I suspect that Mr. Chen's days as a station mechanic are numbered. The galaxy has a way of putting people with his particular moral character into positions where they can do the most good. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? I mean, Seraphina said, that word of tonight's events will spread. The fact that a human mechanic risked his life to save a dragon hatchling and that the dragon hierarchy responded by granting him formal protection will be discussed in every council chamber and cantina from here to the galactic core. She leaned forward slightly. Whether you want it or not, Marcus Chen, you are about to become famous. The implications of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His quiet life, his plan to work his way up through the Mechanics Guild while putting Maya through school, his hope of eventually opening his own repair shop, all of it was about to change. I didn't ask for this, he said quietly. The best leaders never do, Seraphina replied. But that doesn't mean you can avoid the responsibility that comes with your actions. She stood, and the others in the room immediately came to attention. Marcus, I am returning to my flagship now. But this is not goodbye. In 3 days, a Dragon diplomatic courier will arrive with formal documentation of your honor-bonded status. You will also receive communication protocols that will allow you to contact the hierarchy directly should you ever need our assistance. She paused at the door and looked back. One more thing. The Krillians who attacked Lyrian were working for someone. Someone wealthy and powerful enough to commission the kidnapping of a dragon hatchling. My people will investigate this matter thoroughly, but I suspect you may find yourself involved in that investigation as well. Why me? Marcus asked. Because, Seraphina said with a smile that was both warm and slightly predatory, you are the one person in this sector of space who is guaranteed to do the right thing no matter what the personal cost. That makes you extraordinarily valuable in a galaxy where such people are rare. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with Commander Vasquez and the growing realization that his life would never be the same again. 3 days after the Dragon Hierarchy fleet departed, Marcus was still trying to adjust to his new reality. Word had spread throughout Station Omega, 7 with the speed of a plasma fire, and his daily routine had become a series of awkward encounters with people who didn't know how to act around someone under Dragon protection. The station's morning shift change had turned into an impromptu parade of gawkers. Marcus couldn't walk down a corridor without drawing stares, whispered conversations, and the occasional bold individual who wanted to shake his hand or ask for his autograph. The cantina owner had tried to rename his daily special the Dragon Defender Sandwich. Even his supervisor, the same Zalithian who'd been questioning his competence just a few days earlier, now treated him with a mixture of awe and nervous respect. Marcus hated every minute of it. He was sitting in his quarters trying to eat breakfast and failing miserably when his door chimed. He'd learned to dread that sound over the past 3 days, since it usually meant another curious visitor, station official wanting to discuss security implications, or journalist who'd somehow gotten word of the incident. The door slid open, and Marcus glanced up expecting to see another familiar face, wearing an unfamiliar expression. Instead, he found himself looking at a woman he'd never seen before. She was human, probably in her early 30s, with short dark hair and the kind of practical clothing that suggested someone who worked in space on a regular basis. What caught his attention immediately were her eyes, sharp, intelligent, and currently studying him with the intensity of a scientist examining an interesting specimen. "Marcus Chen?" she asked. "Depends who's asking," Marcus replied, setting down his protein bar. "If you're another journalist, I've already told everyone I'm not giving interviews." The woman smiled and stepped into his quarters. The door slid shut behind her, and Marcus noticed that she moved with the fluid confidence of someone who was comfortable in dangerous situations. There was something about her bearing that reminded him of the career security personnel he'd met during his brief stint in that field. "I'm not a journalist," she said. "My name is Captain Elena Vasquez. I work for Terran Intelligence." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Terran Intelligence only got involved in situations that had significant implications for human space. The fact that they'd sent someone to talk to him meant that his encounter with the dragons had attracted attention from the highest levels of Earth's government. "What does Terran Intelligence want with a mechanic?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Captain Vasquez took a seat across from him without being invited. "We want to understand what happened between you and the dragon hierarchy. And more importantly, we want to know what happens next." Marcus studied her face, looking for any sign of the usual human reaction to his new status. But Elena Vasquez looked at him the same way she probably looked at everyone, with professional interest and the slightly distant expression of someone who was always calculating angles. "There's not much to understand," Marcus said. "I helped a dragon hatchling. Her mother was grateful. End of story." "Is it?" Vasquez pulled out a small data pad and activated it. "According to our intelligence sources, the dragon hierarchy hasn't granted formal protection to a non-dragon in over 300 years. The last time it happened was during the vegan trade wars, when a Centaurian diplomat prevented an assassination attempt on a dragon ambassador." She swiped through several screens on the pad, then looked up at Marcus. "That diplomat went on to become one of the most influential figures in galactic politics for the next century. His protection status gave him access to dragon space, dragon resources, and dragon knowledge. He was instrumental in negotiating the peace treaties that ended the trade wars." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "I'm not a diplomat." "No," Vasquez agreed. "You're not, which makes this situation even more interesting. The dragons chose to honor a human mechanic, someone with no political connections, no special training, no obvious strategic value. That suggests they're thinking beyond immediate political considerations." She leaned forward slightly. "Marcus, in the past 3 days, our listening posts have intercepted communications from a dozen major powers. Everyone wants to know what the dragon hierarchy is planning. Some people think they're preparing to take a more active role in galactic politics. Others think they're responding to some threat we don't know about yet." "And what does Terran Intelligence think?" Marcus asked. "We think," Vasquez said carefully, "that you're about to become a very important person, whether you want to or not, and we think it would be better for everyone if Earth had some influence over what happens next." Marcus set down his protein bar and studied the intelligence officer. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Nothing that goes against your conscience," Vasquez said quickly. "We're not asking you to spy on the dragons or betray their trust. What we're asking is that you keep Earth informed of any significant developments, and that you consider how your actions might affect human interests in the galaxy." She paused, then continued in a softer tone. "Marcus, like it or not, you're now one of the most politically significant humans alive. Anything you do, anywhere you go, any relationships you form with other species, it all reflects on humanity as a whole." Before Marcus could respond, his door chimed again. This time when it opened, he saw Station Commander Vasquez standing in the doorway. Her expression was tense, and she was accompanied by 2 security guards. "Mr. Chen," the commander said, "you have a visitor." A Dragon Hierarchy courier ship just docked. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Seraphina had said a courier would arrive with his formal documentation, but he'd somehow hoped it would be a quiet affair. Just one ship? Yes, but Commander Vasquez hesitated. The courier is requesting an immediate meeting. They say it's urgent. Captain Vasquez, the intelligence officer, was already on her feet. Commander, I'm Captain Elena Vasquez, Terran Intelligence. I need to accompany Mr. Chen to this meeting. The station commander looked between the two Vasquezes, confusion evident on her face. I'm sorry, what's your connection to this situation? Mr. Chen is a person of strategic interest to Earth's government, Captain Vasquez said smoothly. Given the significance of his relationship with the Dragon Hierarchy, we need to ensure that human interests are represented in any diplomatic exchanges. Marcus stood up, frustrated with being talked about like he wasn't in the room. Look, I appreciate everyone's concern, but I think I can handle talking to a dragon courier by myself. Actually, Commander Vasquez said, the courier specifically requested that you bring any advisors or representatives you deem appropriate. They seem to expect this to be a formal diplomatic meeting. Marcus felt a headache building behind his eyes. A few days ago, his biggest concern had been replacing a faulty atmospheric recycler. Now he was apparently expected to conduct diplomacy on behalf of the human race. Fine, he said. Captain Vasquez can come, but I want to be clear, I'm not speaking for Earth or humanity or anyone else. I'm just Marcus Chen, and I'm just trying to figure out what's happening to my life. The walk to the docking bay felt like a funeral march. Word had somehow spread that another dragon ship had arrived, and the corridors were packed with curious onlookers. Marcus tried to ignore the stares and whispered conversations, but it was impossible to miss the mixture of excitement, fear, and awe on people's faces. When they reached the diplomatic docking bay, Marcus was surprised to see that it had been formally decorated with the station's ceremonial banners and honor guard. Commander Vasquez had apparently decided that if Station Omega 7 was going to host Dragon Hierarchy diplomacy, they were going to do it properly. The courier ship itself was a work of art. Unlike the massive warships that had accompanied Seraphina, this vessel was smaller and more elegant, its hull covered in the same star-filled scales that Marcus had seen on the dragons themselves. It seemed to shimmer and shift as he watched, as if it were partially phased into some other dimension. The airlock cycled, and a single figure emerged. This dragon was different from any Marcus had seen before. He was somehow certain it was a she stood about 6 feet tall in her humanoid form, with scales that shifted from deep emerald to brilliant gold depending on the angle of the light. Her movements were precise and graceful, and she carried herself with the bearing of someone who was accustomed to delivering important messages. Marcus Chen, she said, her voice carrying the same crystalline quality as Seraphina's but with a younger, more energetic tone. I am Lystra Corvain, voice of the Empress. I bring greetings from Her Majesty Seraphina Mordith, and urgent news that affects your status. Marcus stepped forward, acutely aware of the formal setting and the multiple audiences watching this exchange. I'm Marcus Chen. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of Terran Intelligence. Lystra nodded politely to Captain Vasquez, then focused her attention back on Marcus. Mr. Chen, circumstances have developed that require immediate clarification of your position. May we speak privately? Commander Vasquez stepped forward. With respect, we've prepared a secure conference room. I mean privately, Lystra said firmly. What I have to discuss with Mr. Chen involves Dragon Hierarchy security matters that cannot be shared with station personnel or intelligence operatives. Captain Vasquez started to object, but Marcus held up a hand. It's okay, Lystra. Is this about the Krillians who attacked the Hatchling? Lystra's expression grew grim. It is about much more than that, I'm afraid. Mr. Chen, we have discovered who was behind the attempted kidnapping. And that discovery has created a situation that threatens to destabilize this entire sector of space. She gestured toward her ship. Will you come aboard? I give you my word that you will be safely returned, but what I have to tell you cannot wait, and it cannot be overheard." Marcus looked at the faces around him. Commander Vasquez trying to balance diplomatic protocol with security concerns. Captain Vasquez clearly frustrated at being excluded from what was obviously an important intelligence briefing, and the various station personnel who were watching this scene with fascination. 3 days ago, he would never have considered stepping onto an alien warship alone, but 3 days ago, he'd been a different person, living a different life. "Okay," Marcus said, "but I want to send a message to my sister first. If something happens to me, she needs to know where I went." Lystra nodded approvingly. An intelligent precaution. "You may send your message from my ship's communication array. It will be more secure than the station's systems." As Marcus followed Lystra toward the airlock, he heard Captain Vasquez call out behind him. "Marcus! Remember what we discussed? Consider the implications." Marcus paused and looked back. "Captain, I'm going to do what I think is right. That's all I can promise." The interior of the Dragon courier ship was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of the same scale-like material as the hull, but they glowed with a soft, warm light that felt somehow alive. The air had a quality that reminded him of mountain mornings, clean, crisp, and charged with energy. Lystra led him to what appeared to be a combination briefing room and private study. The furniture was clearly designed for dragon physiology, but adjusted to accommodate a human guest. Through a large viewport, Marcus could see Station Omega, 7 slowly rotating beneath them. "Please sit," Lystra said, taking a position across from him. "First, let me deliver the formal items I was asked to bring you." She produced a small crystal case from her robes and opened it carefully. Inside were 3 objects: a crystalline badge that seemed to contain swirling galaxies, a communication device unlike anything in Marcus's experience, and a data crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. "The badge is your formal identification as an honor-bonded individual," Lystra explained. "It will be recognized by any Dragon Hierarchy vessel or facility, and it contains genetic locks that make it impossible to forge or transfer. The communication device will allow you to contact Dragon space directly. It operates on quantum entanglement principles and will work from anywhere in the galaxy." She held up the data crystal. "This contains detailed information about your new status, including rights, privileges, and responsibilities. It also contains historical context about other honor-bonded individuals and how they have used their position." Marcus accepted the items, noting that the badge felt warm to the touch and seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "And the urgent news?" Lystra's expression grew serious. "Marcus, our investigation into the attempted kidnapping has revealed something deeply troubling. The individual who commissioned the attack was not simply a wealthy collector as we initially suspected. She activated a holographic display that showed a complex star chart with various trade routes and political boundaries marked in different colors. The person who wanted Lyrian captured was Administrator Krell Voss of the Hegemony Council. Do you know who that is?" Marcus shook his head. "I've heard of the Hegemony Council, but I don't know the details." The Hegemony Council is a coalition of 12 species that controls approximately 30% of the galaxy's trade routes, Lystra explained. "They've been pushing for increased expansion into what they call underutilized space, sectors that are currently under Dragon Hierarchy protection or neutrality agreements." The display zoomed in on a particular region that Marcus recognized as the area around Station Omega. 7. Administrator Voss has been one of the most vocal advocates for hegemony expansion. He's also been pushing for a revision of the ancient treaties that give dragons special status in galactic law. Marcus felt a chill as he began to understand the implications. He wanted to kidnap Lyrian to what? Blackmail the dragon hierarchy? Worse, Lystra said grimly. "We have evidence that he planned to stage her death and make it appear that human pirates were responsible. The goal was to provide the Hegemony Council with justification for a military response against both human space and dragon-protected systems." The pieces clicked into place in Marcus's mind with horrifying clarity. He was trying to start a war that would have allowed the hegemony to seize control of dozens of systems while claiming they were acting in response to an unprovoked attack, Lystra confirmed. Your intervention didn't just save Lyrian's life, Marcus. It prevented an interstellar conflict that could have killed millions. Marcus sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was being told. But that's over now, right? Boss's plan failed. And you know he was behind it. Lystra's expression grew even more serious. That's where the current crisis begins. We have proof of Voss's involvement, but we cannot act on it directly without triggering the very conflict he was trying to create. If the Dragon Hierarchy moves against a Hegemony Council administrator, even one who attempted to kidnap our children, it will be seen as an act of aggression. So what happens now? Now, Lystra said, Empress Seraphina has a proposition for you, one that could resolve this crisis peacefully, but would require you to take on a role far beyond anything you've imagined. Marcus looked out the viewport at Station Omega 7, thinking about his quiet life as a mechanic, his plans to help his sister through school, and his hope for a simple future. All of that seemed very far away now. What kind of role? He asked. Lystra smiled, and for the first time since boarding her ship, Marcus saw something like warmth in her expression. How do you feel about becoming the first human ambassador to the Dragon Hierarchy? Marcus stared at Lystra for several long seconds, certain he had misheard her. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Ambassador, Lystra repeated patiently. The first human ambassador to the Dragon Hierarchy. It's a position that has never existed before, but current circumstances require unprecedented solutions. Marcus stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars beyond Station Omega 7. Less than a week ago, the most important decision he'd made was which tool to use for a particularly stubborn coupling. Now he was being offered a diplomatic position that would reshape human-dragon relations for generations to come. I'm a mechanic, he said finally. I fix atmospheric recyclers and patch hull breaches. I don't know anything about diplomacy or interstellar politics. Lystra joined him at the viewport. Marcus, may I tell you something about dragon culture that most other species don't understand? He nodded, still staring out at the stars. Dragons measure worth differently than most species, she continued. We don't care about formal education, political connections, or social status. What we care about is the character of an individual's actions when no one is watching, when there's no benefit to themselves, when doing the right thing requires sacrifice. She gestured towards Station Omega 7. In that corridor, faced with 3 armed Krillians, you had every reason to walk away. You could have told yourself that it wasn't your problem, that you had your own life to worry about, that getting involved would only bring trouble. Instead, you risked everything to protect a child you'd never seen before, from a species you'd only heard about in stories. Marcus turned to face her. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Lystra said firmly. They wouldn't have. We've studied human behavior extensively, Marcus. We know how rare genuine altruism is in your species, or any species for that matter. Most beings require some form of incentive to act selflessly. You acted purely from moral conviction. She moved to the holographic display and brought up a different star chart, this one showing the complex web of political relationships between the various galactic powers. Do you see this? This is the current state of galactic politics, a delicate balance of competing interests, mutual threats, and temporary alliances. Everything is transactional. Everything is calculated for advantage. The display zoomed in on a particular cluster of systems. The Hegemony Council wants to expand their territory. The Arcturian Federation wants to maintain their technological monopolies. The Zalithian merchant houses want to control trade routes. Everyone is playing angles, looking for advantages, trying to gain power at someone else's expense. Marcus studied the display, beginning to understand the complexity of the political landscape he was being asked to enter. And where did the dragons fit into this? We don't, Lystra said simply. Dragons have always remained largely separate from galactic politics. We're too long-lived, too powerful, and too few in number to engage in the kind of constant maneuvering that drives the younger species. We intervene only when absolutely necessary, and we prefer to solve problems through overwhelming force rather than negotiation. She turned to face him directly. But that approach has limitations. When Administrator Voss attempted to kidnap Lyrian, he was counting on our predictable response. He expected us to either retaliate massively, which would justify hegemony expansion, or to remain silent, which would signal that dragons could be attacked with impunity. Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place, but my intervention changed the equation. Exactly. Your actions created a third option, one that Voss never considered. By protecting Lyrian, you established a personal connection between humanity and the dragon hierarchy. And by doing so purely for moral conviction, you demonstrated that humans are capable of the kind of principled action that dragons respect above all else. Lystra activated another section of the display showing what appeared to be a timeline of recent events. In the past 4 days, since news of your honor-bonded status spread, we've seen a fundamental shift in how other species view both humans and dragons. Suddenly, we're not just distant, powerful beings who occasionally interfere in galactic affairs. We're potential allies who have chosen to honor a human. And that's significant because, Lystra said, it suggests that dragons might be willing to take a more active role in galactic politics, particularly as allies of humanity. Every major power in the galaxy is now reassessing their relationship with both species. Marcus sat back down, feeling overwhelmed by the implications. So you want me to become an ambassador because my actions accidentally shifted galactic politics? We want you to become an ambassador, Lystra corrected, because you're the one person in this sector of space whom we trust completely. And because the current crisis requires someone who can represent both human and dragon interests without being corrupted by political considerations. She sat across from him again, her expression serious but encouraging. Trust Teddy. Marcus Administrator Voss's plan may have failed, but he's not going to give up. Our intelligence suggests that he's now working on a different approach, one that involves manipulating other species into conflicts with each other while the hegemony positions itself to expand into the resulting chaos. What kind of conflicts? Border disputes between human colonies and Arcturian research stations? Trade disagreements between Zalithian merchants and Terran shipping companies? Resource conflicts between mining operations and conservation efforts? Lystra pulled up another display showing various hotspots throughout the sector. Individually, these are minor issues, but if they all escalate simultaneously, Marcus could see the strategy. It would create enough chaos to justify hegemony peacekeeping operations. Precisely. And once hegemony forces are established in a system, they tend to become permanent. Within a decade, they could control this entire region of space. Marcus studied the display, thinking about the implications for humanity, for the dragons, and for all the other species caught in the middle. So how does making me an ambassador help with that? Lystra smiled. Because an ambassador with dragon backing and human understanding could coordinate responses to these manufactured crises. You could work with local governments to resolve disputes before they escalate. You could provide early warning when hegemony agents are stirring up trouble. Most importantly, you could serve as a visible symbol that dragons and humans are working together. That's a pretty big job for someone with no diplomatic training. Which is why you wouldn't be working alone, Lystra said. The dragon hierarchy would provide you with the finest advisors, analysts, and support staff in the galaxy. You'd have access to our intelligence networks, our diplomatic protocols, and our historical knowledge. But the decisions would be yours, based on your judgment and your understanding of what's right. Marcus looked out the viewport again, thinking about everything that had changed in his life over the past week. What about my sister? What about my life on the station? Your sister Maya is exceptionally bright, Lystra said, and Marcus was startled to realize she knew about Maya. We've reviewed her academic records and her aptitude scores. If you accept this position, the Dragon Hierarchy would be pleased to sponsor her education at the finest institutions in human space. She could study engineering, diplomacy, xenobiology, whatever interests her. You've been investigating my family? We've been ensuring your security, Lystra corrected gently. As an honor-bonded individual, you and your immediate family are under dragon protection. That includes making sure that your sister's future is secure, regardless of what choice you make today. Marcus felt a wave of relief mixed with apprehension. Maya had always been the smart one in the family, the one with real potential to make something of herself. If the dragons could guarantee her education and her safety, what exactly would this ambassadorial position involve? He asked. Lystra brought up a new display, showing a magnificent space station unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, with graceful spires and flowing architecture that seemed to blend advanced technology with natural forms. This is Nexus Prime, she said. It's a Dragon Hierarchy diplomatic station located at the intersection of several major trade routes. It serves as a neutral meeting ground for various species, as well as a base of operations for dragon diplomatic activities. The display zoomed in to show various sections of the station. As human ambassador, you would have your own embassy facility within the station, along with quarters for yourself and your staff. You would attend diplomatic gatherings, represent human interests and negotiations with other species, and coordinate with dragon officials on matters of mutual concern. It sounds like a huge responsibility, but you wouldn't be expected to handle everything immediately. The position would begin as a learning role, with extensive training and guidance from experienced dragon diplomats. Over time, as you develop the necessary skills and knowledge, you would take on greater independence and authority. Marcus tried to imagine himself in formal diplomatic settings, negotiating with alien species and making decisions that could affect millions of lives. The idea was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. What if I make mistakes? What if I'm not good at it? Then you'll make mistakes and learn from them, just like every other diplomat in the galaxy, Lystra said pragmatically. The difference is that you'll be making them from a foundation of genuine moral conviction, rather than political calculation. That's more valuable than all the training in the galaxy. Marcus stood up and began pacing, trying to work through the decision. If I say yes, when would this start? Immediately, Lystra said. The current crisis requires urgent action, and every day we delay gives Administrator Voss more time to implement his new strategy. Empress Seraphina has already begun preparing for your arrival at Nexus Prime. She's that confident I'll accept? Lystra smiled. She's hopeful, but she also understands the magnitude of what she's asking. If you decline, the offer will remain open. However, the immediate crisis would need to be addressed through more traditional dragon methods. Marcus didn't need to ask what that meant. Dragons had been dealing with problems through overwhelming force for millennia. If diplomacy failed, they would simply eliminate Administrator Voss and anyone else involved in the conspiracy, regardless of the political consequences. How long do I have to decide? I need an answer before I return to Nexus Prime, Lystra said. My ship is scheduled to depart in 6 hours. Marcus felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. 6 hours to choose between his quiet life as a station mechanic and a role that could reshape the future of human-dragon relations. 6 hours to decide whether he was ready to become the person that his actions in that corridor had apparently marked him to be.
Can I contact my sister?
I need to talk to Maya before I make this decision. Of course, Lystra said. The communication array is at your disposal. Take all the time you need. As Marcus prepared to make what might be the most important call of his life, he couldn't help but think about how everything had started with a simple decision to help someone in trouble. Now that same moral conviction was being asked to guide him into a future he had never imagined. But maybe, he thought as he activated the communication system, that was exactly the kind of person the galaxy needed in these complicated times. Maybe the fact that he didn't want power or glory or political advantage was precisely what made him suited for this role. Now he just had to convince his little sister that her big brother hadn't completely lost his mind. The quantum communication array on Lystra's ship was unlike anything Marcus had ever used. Instead of the standard video screen and audio pickup he was accustomed to, the Dragon technology created what appeared to be a three-dimensional holographic space where he could see and interact with his sister as if she were sitting across from him. Maya appeared in the hologram exactly as he remembered her from their last conversation 3 weeks ago. Bright-eyed, energetic, and wearing the practical coveralls that had become the unofficial uniform of engineering students. But her expression shifted from delight to concern as soon as she saw his face. "Marcus, you look terrible." "What's wrong?" Marcus managed a weak smile. "It's been an interesting week." "Interesting how?" "Did something happen at the station? Are you hurt?" Maya's eyes narrowed as she noticed the fading marks on his shoulder where the plasma burn had been treated. "You are hurt. What happened?" "Maya, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to the whole story before you say anything, okay?" His sister's expression grew serious. Maya had always been mature for her age, a side effect of growing up in a family where resources were tight and both siblings had learned early to look out for each other. "Okay, I'm listening." Marcus told her everything. The attack on the Dragon Hatchling, his intervention, the arrival of Empress Seraphina, his new honor-bonded status, and finally Lystra's offer to become the first human ambassador to the Dragon hierarchy. Maya listened without interruption, her expression cycling through disbelief, amazement, concern, and something that might have been pride. When he finished, they sat in silence for several minutes. Maya stared at something off-camera, clearly processing everything she'd heard. "So," she said finally, "my brother, the guy who once spent 3 hours trying to convince me that we couldn't afford pizza for dinner, is now under the personal protection of beings who could probably buy and sell entire star systems. That's—" Maya leaned forward in the hologram. "Marcus, do you understand what you've been offered? This isn't just a job. This is a chance to be part of something that could change the entire galaxy." Marcus blinked, surprised by her response. "Maya, this would mean leaving everything behind. My job, my life on the station, my plans to help you through school, your plans to work yourself to death in a maintenance bay while I accumulated debt that would take both of us decades to pay off," Maya said firmly. "Marcus, I love you for wanting to take care of me, but we both know that the current plan wasn't really working." She stood up and moved out of the hologram's range for a moment, then returned carrying something that looked like a datapad. "I've been accepted to the Advanced Engineering program at Mars Technical Institute." Marcus felt his heart sink. Mars Technical was the most prestigious engineering school in human space and also the most expensive. "Maya, we can't afford—" "Full scholarship," Maya interrupted, grinning. "Apparently, someone submitted a recommendation on my behalf from the Dragon hierarchy. The letter was signed by someone called Lystra Corvain, voice of the Empress." Marcus stared at his sister, then slowly turned to look at Lystra, who had been quietly monitoring other systems while giving them privacy. The Dragon diplomat looked up and smiled innocently. "You were planning this," Marcus said. "I was ensuring that your family's welfare wouldn't be a factor in your decision," Lystra replied calmly. "Dragon protection extends to immediate family members, which includes educational opportunities." Maya's image leaned forward excitedly. "Marcus, do you know what this means? I can study under the best engineering professors in human space, with access to Dragon technical knowledge. I could spend my summers doing research internships on Dragon stations. I could become part of the team that develops the new technologies that will come out of human-dragon cooperation." Marcus looked at his sister's excited face and felt something shift inside him. Maya had always been the dreamer in the family, the one who talked about changing the galaxy while he focused on paying the bills and keeping them both safe. But now she was being offered the chance to actually do it. "Are you saying you want me to take this job?" "I'm saying," Maya said, her expression growing serious, "that you've already made your choice. You made it when you decided to help that Dragon hatchling, knowing it might cost you your life. Everything that's happened since then is just the galaxy catching up to who you really are." She paused, then smiled. "Besides, how many people get the chance to be the first human ambassador to an ancient dragon empire? This is the kind of opportunity that historians write about." Marcus felt the last of his reservations melting away. If Maya was excited about the possibilities rather than worried about the risks, maybe he was overthinking this. Maybe sometimes the right choice was also the one that led to the most interesting future. "What if I'm not good at it?" he asked. "Then you'll learn," Maya said matter-of-factly. "You learned how to fix atmospheric recyclers. You learned how to handle station security situations. You learned how to survive plasma burns from Krillian energy weapons. I think you can probably learn how to be a diplomat." Marcus laughed, feeling lighter than he had in days. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been the smart one in the family," Maya said with a grin. "I just let you think you were the responsible one, because you enjoyed it so much." After ending the call with Maya, Marcus found himself back in the briefing room with Lystra. The dragon diplomat was reviewing what appeared to be several data streams on her holographic display, but she looked up as he entered. "Have you reached a decision?" she asked. Marcus took a deep breath. "I have questions first." "Of course. What exactly happened to Administrator Voss? You said the dragon hierarchy couldn't move against him directly, but that doesn't mean you're just going to ignore his attempted kidnapping of a dragon hatchling." Lystra's expression grew satisfied in a way that made Marcus slightly nervous. "Administrator Voss is currently experiencing what humans might call a run of bad luck. His personal finances are under investigation for irregularities. Several of his key political allies have distanced themselves from him due to scandals involving their own activities. His administrative authority is being challenged by rivals within the Hegemony Council." A mechanic took a shot protecting a dragon hatchling. 3 minutes later, the Dragon Empress responded. HFY Part 2.